The Sydney Opera House is a multi-venue performing arts centre in Sydney, Australia, identified as one of the 20th century's most distinctive buildings. Designed by Danish architect Jørn Utzon, the building was formally opened on 20 October 1973 after a gestation beginning with Utzon's 1957 selection as winner of an international design competition. The Government of New South Wales, led by the Premier, Joseph Cahill, authorised work to begin in 1958 with Utzon directing construction. The government's decision to build Utzon's design is often overshadowed by circumstances that followed, including cost and scheduling overruns, as well as the architect's ultimate resignation. The Sydney Opera House became a UNESCO World Heritage Site on 28 June 2007. The building and its surrounds occupy the whole of Bennelong Point in Sydney Harbour, between Sydney Cove and Farm Cove, adjacent to the Sydney Central Business District and the Royal Botanic Gardens, and close by the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Though its name suggests a single venue, the building comprises multiple performance venues which together are among the busiest of performing arts centres, hosting well over 1,500 performances annually. Attended by more than 1.2 million people, a wide range of performances is presented in the venues by numerous performing arts producers, including 4 key resident companies: Opera Australia, the Australian Ballet, the Sydney Theatre Company and the Sydney Symphony Orchestra. As one of the most popular visitor attractions in Australia, more than 8 million people visit the site each year, with around 350,000 visitors annually taking a guided tour of the building. The building is managed by the Sydney Opera House Trust, an agency of the New South Wales state government. Description: the facility features a modern expressionist design, with a series of large precast concrete shells, each composed of sections of a sphere of 75.2 meters radius, forming the roofs of the structure, set on a monumental podium. The building covers 1.8 hectares of land and is 183 meters long and 120 meters wide at its widest point. It is supported on 588 concrete piers sunk as much as 25 meters below sea level. Although the roof structures are commonly referred to as shells, they are precast concrete panels supported by precast concrete ribs, not shells in a strictly structural sense. Though the shells appear uniformly white from a distance, they actually feature a subtle chevron pattern composed of 1,056,006 tiles in 2 colors, glossy white and matte cream. The tiles were manufactured by the Swedish company Höganäs AB, which generally produced stoneware tiles for the paper mill industry. Apart from the tile of the shells and the glass curtain walls of the foyer spaces, the building's exterior is largely clad with aggregate panels composed of pink granite quarried at Tirana. Significant interior surface treatments also include off-form concrete, Australian white birch plywood supplied from Wauchope in northern New South Wales, and brush box glulam. Of the 2 larger spaces, the concert hall is in the western group of shells, the Joan Sutherland Theatre in the eastern group. The scale of the shells was chosen to reflect the internal height requirements, with low entrance spaces rising over the seating areas up to the high stage towers. The smaller venues are within the podium, beneath the concert hall. A smaller group of shells set to the western side of the monumental steps houses the Bennelong restaurant. The podium is surrounded by substantial open public spaces, and the large stone-paved forecourt area with the adjacent monumental steps is regularly used as a performance space. Performance venues and facilities. The Sydney Opera House includes a number of performance venues. Concert Hall, with 2,679 seats, the home of the Sydney Symphony Orchestra and used by a large number of other concert presenters. It contains the Sydney Opera House Grand Organ, the largest mechanical tracker action organ in the world, with over 10,000 pipes. Joan Sutherland Theatre, a proscenium theatre with 1,507 seats, the Sydney home of Opera Australia and the Australian Ballet. Until 16 October 2012 it was known as the Opry Theatre. Drama Theatre, a proscenium theatre with 544 seats, used by the Sydney Theatre Company and other dance and theatrical presenters. Playhouse, an end-stage theatre with 398 seats. Studio, a flexible space with a maximum capacity of 400 depending on configuration. Utzon Room, a small multi-purpose venue, seating up to 210. Recording studio. Outdoor forecourt, a flexible open-air venue with a wide range of configuration options. Other areas are also used for performances on an occasional basis. Venues are also used for conferences, ceremonies and social functions. Other facilities. The building also houses a recording studio, cafes, restaurants, bars and retail outlets. Guided tours are available, including a frequent tour of the front-of-house spaces, and a daily backstage tour that takes visitors backstage to see areas normally reserved for performers and crew members. Construction history. Origins. Planning began in the late 1940s, when Eugene Goossens, the director of the NSW State Conservatorium of Music, lobbied for a suitable venue for large theatrical productions. The normal venue for such productions, the Sydney Town Hall, was not considered large enough. By 1954, Goossens succeeded in gaining the support of NSW Premier Joseph Cahill, who called for designs for a dedicated opera house. It was also Goossens who insisted that Bennelong Point be the site. Cahill had wanted it to be on or near Wynyard Railway Station in the northwest of the CBD. An international design competition was launched by Cahill on 13 September 1955 and received 233 entries, representing architects from 32 countries. The criteria specified a large hall seating 3,000 and a small hall for 1,200 people, each to be designed for different uses, including full-scale operas, orchestral and choral concerts, mass meetings, lectures, ballet performances and other presentations. The winner, announced in 1957, was Jørn Utzon, a Danish architect. According to legend, the Utzon design was rescued from a final cut of 30 rejects by the noted Finnish-American architect Eero Saarinen. The prize was £5,000. Utzon visited Sydney in 1957 to help supervise the project. His office moved to Palm Beach, Sydney in February 1963. Utzon received the Pritzker Architecture Prize, architecture's highest honour, in 2003. The Pritzker Prize citation read, "There is no doubt that the Sydney Opera House is his masterpiece. It is one of the great iconic buildings of the 20th century. An image of great beauty that has become known throughout the world, a symbol for not only a city, but a whole country and continent." Design and construction. The Fort Macquarie Tram Depot, occupying the site at the time of these plans, was demolished in 1958 and construction began in March 1959. It was built in 3 stages. Stage 1 consisted of building the upper podium, Stage 2 the construction of the outer shells, Stage 3 interior design and construction. Stage 1 Podium. Stage 1 commenced on 2 March 1959 with the construction firm Civil and Civic, monitored by the engineers over Arup and Partners. The government had pushed for work to begin early, fearing that funding, or public opinion, might turn against them. However, Utzon had still not completed the final designs. Major structural issues still remained unresolved. By 23 January 1961, work was running 47 weeks behind, mainly because of unexpected difficulties. Work on the podium was finally completed in February 1963. The forced early start led to significant later problems, not least of which was the fact that the podium columns were not strong enough to support the roof structure, and had to be rebuilt. Stage 2. Roof. The shells of the competition entry were originally of undefined geometry, but, early in the design process, the shells were perceived as a series of parabolas supported by precast concrete ribs. However, engineers over Arup and partners were unable to find an acceptable solution to constructing them. The formwork for using in situ concrete would have been prohibitively expensive, and, because there was no repetition in any of the roof forms, the construction of precast concrete for each individual section would possibly have been even more expensive. From 1957 to 1963, the design team went through at least 12 iterations of the form of the shells, trying to find an economically acceptable form before a workable solution was completed. The design work on the shells involved one of the earliest uses of computers in structural analysis, to understand the complex forces to which the shells would be subjected. The computer system was also used in the assembly of the arches. The pins in the arches were surveyed at the end of each day, and the information was entered into the computer so the next arch could be properly placed the following day. In mid-1961, the design team found a solution to the problem, the shells all being created as sections from a sphere. This solution allows arches of varying length to be cast in a common mold, and a number of arch segments of common length to be placed adjacent to one another, to form a spherical section. With whom exactly this solution originated has been the subject of some controversy. It was originally credited to Utzon. Over Arup's letter to Ashworth, a member of the Sydney Opera House Executive Committee, states, Utzon came up with an idea of making all the shells of uniform curvature throughout in both directions. Peter Jones, the author of Over Arup's biography, states that the architect and his supporters alike claimed to recall the precise eureka moment. The engineers and some of their associates, with equal conviction, recall discussion in both central London and at Ove's house. He goes on to claim that the existing evidence shows that Arup's canvassed several possibilities for the geometry of the shells, from parabolas to ellipsoids and spheres. Yuzo Mikami, a member of the design team, presents an opposite view in his book on the project, Utzon's sphere. It is unlikely that the truth will ever be categorically known, but there is a clear consensus that the design team worked very well indeed for the first part of the project, and that Utzon, Arup, and Ronald Jenkins all played a very significant part in the design development. As Peter Murray states in the Saga of the Sydney Opera House, the two men, and their teams, enjoyed a collaboration that was remarkable in its fruitfulness and, despite many traumas, was seen by most of those involved in the project as a high point of architect-engineer collaboration. The design of the roof was tested on scale models in wind tunnels at Southampton University and later NPL in order to establish the wind pressure distribution around the roof shape in very high winds, which helped in the design of the roof tiles and their fixtures. The shells were constructed by Hornibrook Group Pty Limited, who were also responsible for construction in Stage 3. Hornibrook manufactured the 2,400 precast ribs and 4,000 roof panels in an on-site factory and also developed the construction processes. The achievement of this solution avoided the need for expensive formwork construction by allowing the use of precast units. Over Arup and Partners site engineer supervised the construction of the shells, which used an innovative adjustable steel truss erection arch to support the different roofs before completion. On 6 April 1962, it was estimated that the Opera House would be completed between August 1964 and March 1965. Stage 3. Interiors. Stage 3. The interiors started with Utzon moving his entire office to Sydney in February 1963. However, there was a change of government in 1965, and the new Robert Askin government declared the project under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Public Works. Due to the ministry's criticism of the project's costs and time, along with their impression of Utzon's designs being impractical, this ultimately led to his resignation in 1966. The cost of the project so far, even in October 1966, was still only $22.9 million, less than a quarter of the final $102 million cost. However, the projected costs for the design were at this stage much more significant. The second stage of construction was progressing toward completion when Utzon resigned. His position was principally taken over by Peter Hall, who became largely responsible for the interior design. Other persons appointed that same year to replace Utzon were E. H. Farmer as government architect, S. Littlemore and Lionel Todd. Following Utzon's resignation, the acoustic advisor, Lothar Kremer, confirmed to the Sydney Opera House Executive Committee that Utzon's original acoustic design allowed for only 2,000 seats in the main hall further stated that increasing the number of seats to 3,000 as specified in the brief would be disastrous for the acoustics. According to Peter Jones, the stage designer, Martin Carr, criticized the shape, height and width of the stage, the physical facilities for artists, the location of the dressing rooms, the widths of doors and lifts, and the location of lighting switchboards. Significant changes to Utzon's design. The major hall, which was originally to be a multi-purpose opera concert hall, became solely a concert hall, called the Concert Hall. The minor hall, originally for stage productions only, incorporated opera and ballet functions and was called the Opera Theatre, later renamed the Joan Sutherland Theatre. As a result, the Joan Sutherland Theatre is inadequate to stage large-scale opera and ballet. A theatre, a cinema and a library were also added. These were later changed to two live drama theatres and a smaller theatre, in the Round. These now comprise the Drama Theatre, the Playhouse and the Studio respectively. These changes were primarily because of inadequacies in the original competition brief, which did not make it adequately clear how the opera house was to be used. The layout of the interiors was changed, and the stage machinery, already designed and fitted inside the major hall, was pulled out and largely thrown away, as detailed in the 1968 BBC TV documentary Autopsy on a Dream, which chronicles the full spectrum of controversy surrounding the construction of the Sydney Opera House. Externally, the cladding to the podium and the paving, the construction of the glass walls, Utzon's plywood corridor designs, and his acoustic and seating designs for the interior of both major halls, were scrapped completely. His design for the concert hall was rejected as it only seated 2,000, which was considered insufficient. Utzon employed the acoustic consultant Lothar Kremer, and his designs for the major halls were later modeled and found to be very good. The subsequent Todd, Hall and Littlemore versions of both major halls have some problems with acoustics, particularly for the performing musicians. The orchestra pit in the Joan Sutherland Theatre is cramped and dangerous to musicians' hearing. The concert hall has a very high roof, leading to a lack of early reflections on stage. Perspex rings hanging over the stage were added shortly before opening in an attempt to address this problem. Completion and cost. The Opera House was formally completed in 1973, having cost $102 million. H.R. Sam Hoare, the Hornibrook director in charge of the project, provided the following approximations in 1973. Stage 1. Podium Civil and Civic Pty Limited approximately $5.5 million. Stage 2. Roof Shells Mr. Hornibrook Pty Limited approximately $12.5 million. Stage 3. Completion The Hornibrook Group $56.5 million. Separate contracts. Stage equipment, stage lighting and organ $9 million. Fees and other costs $16.5 million. The original cost and scheduling estimates in 1957 projected a cost of £3,500,000 and completion date of 26 January 1963. In actuality, the project was completed 10 years late and 1,457% over budget in real terms.